Hello teachers, Brother Christensen here as we're looking at a Doctrinal Mastery lesson for Mosiah 4:9. You've already taught the chapter lesson, so this lesson will focus a little bit more on specific principles, and we always do the same three things, and maybe that feels a little repetitious, I get it, but I really benefit from repetition. I think our students do too, so I don't think we need to fear it. We can embrace it, and I'll share maybe a couple alternative ideas that may be helpful as we approach this particular lesson. The introduction tells us here's the three things. We're going to maybe spend about 5 minutes on some memorization, not much. A few more minutes, maybe 10, on explaining the doctrine. So this is kind of reviewing what's taught, really from the day before, the lesson before, where we focused on that. And then the last thing, maybe the rest of the time, 20 minutes or so, apply principles of acquiring spiritual knowledge in real life situations, helping our students see life, the conversations, the relationships, the situations of life with the perspective that verses like this will give us. So we start here with an explain, and so maybe 10 minutes on this. This is a review, and so I like the idea, if you did the activity from the lesson before that looks like this, where you had students draw this diagram and then they were going to put believe in God in the middle and then use the reference to list all the things that we believe, that we're invited to believe, that He is, that He created all things, that He has all wisdom, and we're filling all the circles in there. If they did that the day before, if that was something that you did, I might just put that on the board and say, okay, quiz time. Who remembers yesterday, 24 hours ago? How many of these can we list? What did we put in these circles? And just see how they do. And then you could say, if they didn't get them all, quickly turn to Mosiah 4:9 through 10, and let's see what the remainder of the circles are. If you didn't do that yesterday with the previous lesson, you could do that activity pretty quickly here. It's a nice review. And then because we want to have students practice explaining, you could do one of two things. Right here it says choose one of the characteristics. I might put a qualifier on that of some sorts of which characteristic you think is most challenging for people to believe in. And then say, could you explain to your neighbor, or who could explain to the class why that's so important to believe? What difference would it make to believe that, or if the world believed that? And so we're going to pick a few of these characteristics and we're going to practice talking why they're so important. I like that activity. It could get a variety. If we're going to zero on God has all wisdom, believe that He has all wisdom, we might say we're going to finish with this one. Why do you think it's important to know that God has all wisdom? And then tell them to turn their neighbors, and they're going to take 45 seconds each just to explain why they think that's so important. But this is the practice. We're trying to get the understanding of the principles taught in these verses more clearly. So that is our explain. The memorize, I like this idea. I might do it this way. So they're going to write, and you could put this on the board even, believe on one line, in God on another, believe that He has all wisdom, and then the reference. So that's 4 different sections. I might invite students in groups of 4, or you could, as a teacher, just point and say, when I point at you, you're going to give the first one. So you point at a student, they say believe. You point at another student, they say in God. You point to the next student, believe that He has all wisdom, and then the reference. And this is just repeat. And it's fun because you could point at the same student and then over there, and then you can point at the same student and just have some fun with it. And then erase the board and see if they can do it. We're just going to repeat, see if they could get in their heads. 5 minutes is fine. And that's our memorize. Last thing that we're going to do is our practice application. We always review the principles of acquiring spiritual knowledge, and I think that's good. You can decide how much of a review you need, but I like this idea, kind of the alternative idea of using a video to illustrate these principles. If you decide to use the video, you may want to pause it. I would say this could be a fun activity to actually highlight the pausing idea. And so whether you have 3 teams in your class and each team represents a principle of acquiring spiritual knowledge, act in faith, examine concepts with eternal perspective, divinely appointed sources, and whether you have them stand up and say, as soon as you see a spot in the video where we're talking about your principle in some way at all, you sit down. Or you could do it opposite. You could tell them that, give them some object and say, this is your remote, and you could just make it up and say, as soon as you see any reference to your principle, you got to raise your hand and act like you're clicking, and we're going to pause the video. This is kind of a fun way to watch videos where you're pausing and you're discussing. And so if they say pause, you're going to say, why? What did you see that had to do with acting in faith, and why does that make a difference in this scenario? And so you're using the video as a tool for discussion, not just as something to watch, but it's a very active way of approaching the video. If you chose to go this route, as you finish up class, you can have those same 3 groups say, we're going to have just somebody from each group respond to these questions. So your Act in Faith group, they've got a couple questions. Your Examine Concepts and Questions, they've had a couple questions. And you're just going to summarize together. I think this will be a fun lesson. You'll do wonderfully. Thanks for all that you do.